Well, happy Friday, everybody. Welcome to the OneSoccer Roundtable. Adam Jenkins, Oliver Platt, Charlie O'Connor Clark, and down to the wire and in the midst of making his lunch, Gareth Wheeler joins us today as well.
Why do you always do... Great start.
Because I gotta wire you up, and you know it. We love you. It is our Friday roundtable. That means we are here for you, our viewers. Get your comments in wherever you're watching. I'm assuming this is on YouTube primarily, but we're pretty much everywhere on OneSoccer these days. So get your comments in. Instagram as well. I know Armin put out some Instagram stories earlier. We'll answer as many as possible. We have some questions as well to get the conversation rolling. And even if you don't have a question, feel free to just comment on your thoughts on what everyone is having to say today. So let's begin with Oliver Platt and a reaction to Canada's opening match of the Arnold Clark Cup. It was an exciting 1-1 draw. Canada Soccer is trying to call it the Commonwealth Classico or something. Not sure I'm on board with that one, but the match itself was great. Ollie, your takeaways from it?
Yeah, I'm absolutely I'm not on board with that one. I thought first half not so good, second half better, right? Like it wasn't, I don't think, Canada's best performance, but there was improvement after half time. Look, we all know we've all been saying the same thing ever since, even before the Olympics, right? We know where this team needs to get better. They're at their best. They're a world-class defensive team. They don't create enough chances. They're not good enough in possession to win a World Cup right now, in my opinion. And I think Beth Priestman knows that. I think the team knows that. Jesse Fleming talked about it before the game. And so that's what the next, 18 months is going to be about, is trying to improve that side of their game. In the second half, like I said, it did get better compared to the first half. And particularly in transition, we started to see Fleming, release the front three. We started to see Ashley Lawrence play with a bit more intent, as we saw on the equalizer. So those are good signs. But yeah, there's a lot to do in that side of the game if they're going to, best all of these top European nations that are going to be competing for them at the World Cup on top of obviously the US and Brazil and everyone else.
Well, I see a comment across the bottom of the screen. Finn, I'm going to send you that $50 e-transfer. The best host in Canada Soccer is finally back. I'll take that compliment. I'm sure everyone on the panel will disagree with you entirely.
And you had to bring it up.
I didn't bring it up. My hands stayed exactly where they were.
It's amazing that your head fits inside that massive screen.
I'm so far from my laptop just so we can fit it all in. Wheels, we saw Janine Becky score quite the goal yesterday. Luke Wildman did a great job on the call, but I know as play-by-play announcers, that's certainly one we'd like to have. She's just becoming more and more of a leader for this team by the match, isn't she?
She's a story for me. I think other than Jessie Fleming, the next best Canadian women's player today. I'm not even quite sure just in terms of form, who might come in next. Maybe Ashley Lawrence, not her best game. Kadisha Buchanan, obviously a rock, but that's where Janine Becky is right now. I believe 34 goals for country. Like the problem is, and when I'm ranking like the players just in terms of their best players or players in terms of importance, Canada just doesn't have players who can score goals. Like there's no one on this team that's a reliable outlet for goals, but that's exactly what Janine Becky has become. And when Becky's not on form or not in the team, you're just looking at this group saying, well, who's going to put the ball into the back of the net? Becky's the answer. So, oh my God, Becky, look at that goal. It was so good. That would have been my call, by the way. So
I'm glad you saved it for here because I'm glad we got that in. And what I think is impressive, Charlie, I'd love for you to weigh in on this as well.
Yeah.
I mean, with the celebration tour, we saw Bev experiment. Becky played it right back and was still one of the best players on the pitch. She's scoring goals when seemingly no one else wants to. Question on Instagram comes from Tiza87, who believes that Jordan looked a little underwhelming in their opinion. What do you think she needs to do to change? And I'll get you to weigh in on Becky's versatility and her blossoming stardom in Canada.
Yeah, so for Jordan, I'm assuming Jordan Huitema here. I'm not sure what exactly I would say she needs to change. I think she just needs minutes, to be honest, because she's not playing a ton at club level at the moment either, and she's been kind of not necessarily the first go-to option with the national team in some of these recent games. And we all know that Jordan Huitema is a very talented attacking player. Again, not necessarily the finisher I think that this team needs, but we see kind of bits and pieces of what she can do in the final third when she's really clicking, when she's got that, just that minutes behind her is kind of what she needs at the moment. So I think I wouldn't be overly concerned, but it's pretty clear that she has maybe fallen a little bit further down the depth chart than we might have thought she'd be 2 years ago even. And as for Janine Becky, just it's incredible what she's able to do for this team. No matter who else comes in, who's the kind of the conversation around this team, Janine Becky continues to step up. And as you said, Adam, any situation, any position, we all know that she's best kind of in the attacking role, coming in off that wing. That cut in yesterday to score the goal was just fantastic. But she can do the defensive work, and she's willing to do the defensive work to make her kind of an undroppable player in his team at the moment, I think.
Well, when we watched them go through the Olympics, and of course the penalty shootout on more than one occasion came into factor. They needed the saves, they needed the goals from the spot, and they got them. It's no secret, Ollie, that offensive struggles have long been a part of this team, and how does that improve? So you see Sinclair out. She's the de facto option until she retires, which we hope isn't for quite some time, so long as she can perform. But Heidema's had this opportunity. She has this opportunity with 2 more matches in England for this Arnold Clark Cup, but is Canada Soccer getting a little bit nervous? Are they looking to the U20s with a little bit more of a magnifying glass to hopefully find someone who might be that spark?
Well, excuse me. No, I don't think so. I just think, Heitzema had a bit of a tough hand, I think, dealt to her yesterday because the first half performance was poor, right? And she was off quite early in the second half. So I don't think they really did any of the things that you know would get Jordan Heitzema at her best. She's going to play in that position where she does come quite deep and almost plays as a number 10 in possession. Like, you need to play into her, right? She's going to post up with her back to goal, get the ball into her feet. That never really happens. If you're going to create chances for her, we know she's really good in the air. Get service in from wide areas. There was no width in the attack in the first half, so I don't know if you can really judge her too much based on that one performance. Her performances for Canada against the top teams do need to improve if she's going to be in contention to start at the World Cup next year. There's no question about that. But yesterday I thought was a tough one. So in terms of the attacking options, I think I'd be very surprised if there's anyone who kind of comes in between now and the World Cup who massively mixes up that group. We've seen Lacasse has come in a bit. She's maybe the only one. Otherwise, I think it's going to be largely the same players, and it's about getting the best out of that group of players.
Gareth, Mitch Voss, on Instagram asked, should Becky move on from Man City? Spoilers, says Mitch, yes. What are your thoughts, and where would be a good landing destination for Becky should that move come up in the future? And don't just say switch Manchester colors.
Well, that's it. Yeah. Ollie, do you want to pull down the blinds? Like, it looks like you're being blinded with the sun coming.
The sun is coming over.
We're going to be here for a while. Don't you get a sunburn? Of course. And it is moving from City to United. United could certainly use her. Losing the derby last weekend. Go to a real club, a real big club where you can take advantage of your profile and popularity. I believe her brother Drew is a United supporter as well. So switch blue from red. Red always looks better.
That was a layup for Gareth, which is why I went to him first, Charlie. But what do you think about a team that Becky should consider moving forward to, or what do you think would be a good fit for her as she chases international aspirations and domestic aspirations as well?
Yeah, it's kind of a tough one because I don't think that the situation in Man City is really that much of a problem for her because she's getting the minutes and they are still quite a good team. There are steps up, I think, in the women's game that you can take at club level. I mean, I think something that I would be really, really happy to see would be if she were to go to Chelsea and play with Jessie Fleming. I think we'd all love to see that, and that would be especially just to have these players playing together more frequently. But I don't think there is really a pressing need for Becky. There are other women's national team players that I think need a move more. So Jordan Heidem is probably one of them, but there are steps up that Becky can take, and maybe it is starting to get to that point where it is time to move on because she has been there for a while. I don't know if United is the answer.
Club on the rise.
United is always the answer if you ask Gareth. This is a question. I'll give it to you, Ollie. This is from Peter from Wainwright. It says, hey fellas, hope you're well. Is Canada the deepest team in women's soccer? I love the way they all play specific roles, yet read the play so well they can fill in where needed. What do you think the depth of this team, the Olympic champions?
No, I don't think they're anywhere near the deepest team in women's soccer, which is still part of kind of part of the problem. Not as big of an issue as it's been in the past, but this is not a pool of players that's got anywhere near the depth that the very top nations. And again, we always come back to this. It's the one with their own domestic leagues, right? That are giving a much wider pool of players opportunities to play professionally week in, week out. So the depth, I wouldn't say that. I think in terms of the squads that they're able to call up now, it's definitely gotten better from where it was a few years ago, where they do have multiple options in most positions who could legitimately start. But there's still a lot of work to do on that front. And it still does feel like, England last year were in transition a little bit, weren't playing very well. And obviously Canada went to England and got a great result and won. Now they have a permanent coach, and now you can kind of just see like there's some really good players on that team. And it is always going to be, until we make major changes to the way we develop players in this country, it's always going to be an uphill struggle to compete with those teams. Doesn't mean we can't, as we've seen, but it's difficult when you're going up against the kind of resources that some of these programs have.
Well, if Charlie or Garrett don't have anything to weigh in on this one, I want to get to a question from Aaron Ginsberg. I love these questions because they're controversial and they're close to the nerves, which makes for very good debate. But Aaron asks, is it time for Desiree Scott to move into more of a Sam Piette type role for the national team? Defensive specialist, maybe not getting as many starts as in the past, especially in Desiree Scott's case where she's been almost a guarantee in any 11 for Canada for quite some time. And on the topic, Aaron adds, love the Destroyer, but Quinn provides so much more going forward. And Wheels, we've seen a lot of Quinn in recent months. I know last year at the She Believes Cup for you, and then I had the some of the international friendlies in the lead up to Tokyo, and we both thought that Quinn was outstanding, and she seems to be growing into that consistency quite a bit for Canada.
They are a better fit in the team, but I would have said that that Des Scott might have not have filled a role in Tokyo, yet she was incredible in terms of the way that Canada played. Like Canada had to play defensive football, sit back, try to take their chances on the counterattack. Like that was it. And Scott was the player that kind of linked it all together. So I think to answer the question, it depends on the team. It depends on the game. I think when Canada steps up in competition, Des definitely has a role to play. But this is about preparation for next summer in the CONCACAF, or this upcoming summer in the CONCACAF championship, where that's your Olympic qualifier, that is your Women's World Cup qualifier, and you're playing the United States. Yeah, Des always has a role to play against the United States, but they're going through a little bit of a rebuild right now. Like they drew Czech Republic last night. Like what is happening there? And then on top of that, Mexico. And I think that Canada should be able to play progressive football against Mexico. I understand that they're developing. I understand they're getting better. But for me, Quinn's a better fit for games like that. So I think that both play a role. I think that if I'm best Priestman, I'd prefer not to play a double pivot, to be honest with you. I think they need a much more attack-minded player than Quinn or Des on the field to play alongside Jessie Fleming in the midfield. And we'll see how that plays out. And Julia Grosso has a role to play in that position as well. So there's options there, but I still think that you need a much more attack-minded option in order to take this team forward and for them to develop and become a much better team playing attacking football, which, let's be honest, even when they won the Olympics, it wasn't free-flowing, very watchable attacking football. And that's an area of their game where they absolutely have to improve if they're going to be able to compete at World Cups.
Charlie, where do you wait on this situation?
Yeah, I agree with Wheels that it is important, I think, to have both of those options because they do kind of play very different roles depending on the kind of game. I think Quinn is the player that you want in a match where you're going to be on the ball, right? Because Quinn has that better range of passing, that better mobility to get attacking players into the spaces that you want to create those chances, right? And again, Desiree Scott can fill that, she's called the destroyer role, to sit in front of those defenders and win the ball and kind of block things off and clog things up in the midfield. So they are very different options. I do think that it was interesting yesterday, maybe a bit of a statement of things to come, that Desiree Scott starts that match, but Jessie Fleming gets the captain's armband. Was kind of interesting to me. And maybe is one of these first hints that Desiree Scott's time is maybe, or her role with this team is starting to maybe shrink a little bit. I think obviously she's a player that Canada's eventually going to have to move on from. And if they do want to play a more positive style of football against teams like Mexico or other teams where they want to be on the ball, then yeah, she's going to have to understand that her role is going to be more situational.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair point. Go ahead, Ollie.
I'm gonna have to put this blind down. So carry on.
Okay.
Yeah,
well,
I gave
take
you
your
the
time,
option
Vlad.
like 5 minutes ago. What happened?
I think it is important, and I just want to add while Ollie is fixing his lighting situation, when we talk about eventually needing to move on from Christine Sinclair when that time comes, there's still a big question mark. But for Desiree Scott, it's there seems to be more suitable candidates waiting in the wings, and Quinn's a great shout. Their game is developing all the time, especially in the NWSL as well, and they've always got a role to play with Canada's women's team. So it's going to be a little bit more of an easier transition tactically, but emotionally, I don't know that any of Canada's ready to see Desiree Scott depart from the women's national team. Ollie, I do want to shift the conversation a little bit to some news coming from Canada Soccer today about the men's national team. Long speculation that the match was going to be at BMO Field. Supporters from outside of the GTA, I'm sure we're hoping to that small slimmer what's the word I'm looking for? Sliver of hope.
Slimmer.
That's the one I'm looking. A slimmer. That's certainly not what I'm getting with these shows from home. But the sliver of hope that it could be in Vancouver, for example. But it was long speculated, long rumored that it was going to be BMO. Your thoughts? I think we've had this conversation in the past where we agree it's probably the right decision.
Yeah, I think it's what the players want and they're most comfortable with. I think it has effectively become Canada's home stadium during these World Cup qualifiers. You know, obviously Edmonton and Hamilton were fantastic, but I think Toronto and BMO Field has always been the preferred base. And it's a window where you play this home game in between two away games again. And so you have to think about that and the travel aspect of it as well. So, yeah, I'm really, really excited for that game. I think, you know, we're either going to see Canada qualify on the day or we're going to be celebrating Canada qualifying in Costa Rica. So that's going to be, I think, a pretty special day for soccer in this country. And I'm not surprised that they've selected Toronto for it.
Gareth, for those who may not have heard and some of our discussions about this in the past about why BMO makes sense logistically, can you just go over some of the Coles notes? And all I alluded to, it's the players' preferred preference. Yeah. Just address why some of those things are.
Players want to be there. It's a properly upkept stadium, so the field's going to be preferable. You're not playing on turf anywhere, especially in March. John Herdman's made this abundantly clear. Travel for the European-based players, it's much easier, much more simplistic to get in and out of Toronto than anywhere else. And Canada's establishing something. Like that night against Panama was something special. And Toronto's had its growing pains in the past. I don't look at that game against Jamaica being a stadium full of Jamaican supporters. Not to mention that Jamaica's out of it and has zero chance to go on and qualify. But the tides are turning. Like the mentality is shifting here in this country where you can go out and support Canada and you can create a home field advantage. I think the Voyageurs have done a fantastic job stepping up to that challenge, working with the CSA, understanding the needs of the players, understanding the needs of the programs at this time. And so we move this forward. And what we're experiencing right now in terms of record numbers, consuming, watching, engaging, people are on board with this team. This isn't just a ho-hum Canada situation anymore. This is a let's effing go Canada type situation. Toronto's a perfect place. No more restrictions, so we can expect a full stadium, full pubs, full bars. And I think that a 4 p.m. kickoff time is awesome because you get to tailgate in the afternoon and carry that party on into the nighttime as well. So let's go! Bring it on. I'm ready for it.
Wheels is fired up. We still not heard anything to suggest that the offer for Project W is off at Casa de Wheeler if they qualify. And John commented as well. We had it on the screen, but I just wanted to give it some airtime as well. That this is it's not the same in terms of what's at stake anymore for Canada, but the logistics of traveling is still very difficult. Going Central America, Toronto, back to Central America. So that's another big factor for Canada and BMO Field. To some Canadian Premier League chat we go. There is a question from the chat that we want to bring in, and we'll weigh in. Also have an article from Ollie coming up soon on League One Ontario that we'll get to. But the question first, this comes from Sounders_YYC on Instagram. CPL question, I'll give it to Ollie first. Are you expecting loans again from Montreal, Toronto, and Vancouver to CPL clubs?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's something that generally happens a bit later, obviously, as we get closer to the MLS season and those rosters start to shake out. But we've already seen, I think, the appetite from all three clubs to send players out on loan. I know Vancouver are keen to do it. Montreal have obviously done it more than any of the other teams. And we saw Toronto, Luke Singh was supposedly heading to Pacific before that one ended up reversing course. So there's definitely the appetite to do it there. One interesting situation is Montreal signed another goalkeeper yesterday. So someone's leaving, right? Whether it's Pantomis, whether it's Jonathan Sirois permanently or loan, I don't know at this point, but that would seem to open that door. I think in particular you'll see some of the clubs that have leaned on this kind of way of recruiting players in the past. Valor's obviously been one, and there'll be more of that this season for sure.
Well, and if there's goalkeepers on the market, especially one that Valor would be familiar with, Charlie, I'm assuming that would be a home run for them if the opportunity presents itself. But otherwise, Do you see more loans coming down the pipe for CPL clubs?
Yeah, I think so. I think Ollie nailed it as usual. This is something that generally happens closer to the season when these MLS clubs are starting to decide what the plan is this season for some of the younger players and the fringe roster players. They've started to see, some of these situations work out for them in the past. Obviously, James Pantomis did well in that Island Games experience with Valor. He came in, did reasonably well in the first team last year with Montreal. I think we are going to start to see it a little bit more. These clubs seem to be paying even more attention to the CPL than maybe they did a couple years ago, because this pathway, this option of sending these players for competitive first team minutes is clearly proving itself to be worthwhile for some of these players. And there are positions, I think, that teams want players to get experience playing not in development leagues, right? They want their defenders playing against fully grown professionals as they would in the CPL, where they might not in a USL or an MLS Next kind of level, right? So I think that there are going to be a few more coming down the pipe, especially as we get closer to the season and these players start to think, hey, I need minutes somewhere. So they might even ask their clubs to send them out on loan like that.
The one thing to think about, though, is I think that CF Montreal might be more willing to do that with MLS Next now coming into the fold and the league making that a priority. Let's see what that means for Toronto FC and other clubs. So look, ideally, I think that CPL should be preferable. Not just because of the standard, not just because of the rise of Canadian players, but look, one of the main reasons that I don't think that many people talk about why some of these players are now getting a look, not only in Major League Soccer, but abroad, there's actual tape on these players. Regular television broadcast, professional broadcasts here on OneSoccer. It is a massive. I'm talking to coaches, I'm talking to scouts, and now they know about these players rather than hearing them or seeing some stats or analytics. You actually get to see them play. Extensive tape goes a long, long way. And the fact that these players are being seen, USL, it's kind of shoddy the way that it's done in terms of their broadcast. I would much prefer my players to go to the Canadian Premier League and being exposed in a positive way. And I think it's paying dividends as of right now.
This is no disrespect to the players that do it, because it's still pretty impressive when you consider the circumstances around film of your matches in lower levels. But researching players even as recently as getting ready for the Forge match, and you go to the YouTube highlight mixtape, and it's just like impossible. A small red circle, and you're trying to track them into the abyss where there's no lighting, so wheels. I think that's a really valid point. Yeah. Charlie, I want to circle back to you on CPL roster construction, and we're starting to see more and more moves come through. What is the biggest off-season move for you thus far, knowing that there's some more to be announced very shortly?
Yeah, well, there are a few potential answers here. I think the obvious one in terms of ceiling of ability and potential impact is ROUNDTABLE signing at Atletico Ottawa. That's probably, for my money, the most exciting signing of the offseason, because he's a player that I think people all over Canada have heard of. He played in MLS. He played in La Liga Dos with Barcelona B. He is a very talented player, and we know that. He's had some struggles with injuries in the last couple of years. He's kind of maybe not been in the right headspace at club level. He needs a bit of a career rejuvenation, right? And I think Ottawa is hopefully the place for that. We know what kind of player he can be in attack and transition. He could score tons of goals in this league, and that would be, I think, a win for everybody, for himself and for Ottawa. Who knows? He has been an inconsistent player in the past. We all know that. But then there are other players coming in this offseason. One I think of is Aiden Daniels going to Halifax Wanderers. They're a team that needs that creative midfielder desperately, and I think he's a player that, I guess his time was kind of up with various other clubs Certainly he moved on from TFC, so I think I'm excited for that one. And, some of these international players coming in, especially at York, they've got this Czech striker, Martin Graciar, who was in the Arsenal Academy and then signed a first-team contract for Fiorentina in Italy. Moved on very quickly from Arsenal to Fiorentina. But he played in the Czech top flight, right, for Sparta Prague, which is a good club and a really high level, and he's only 22, so I think that's another exciting player from an international perspective.
Ollie, what about you? Some of the bigger signings this offseason. We've touched on Didic going to Pacific being massive for Langford. It's an exciting one. What else comes to mind for you, Ollie?
Winning.
Well, that was my answer, right? Like, I know it's not a particularly interesting one, it is an interesting one, but it's nothing new. We know the player. He's not got that kind of mystery of being a new player coming into the league, but he's one I look at who, maybe he has not got the kind of plaudits that he's maybe deserved playing in Edmonton because he has been down the lower part of the table. But he's the kind of player who you put him on a contender like Pacific, and I think they will be a contender and right in the mix again this season. He's potentially a top 5 player in the league. Like when we do the top 50 at the end of this season, I wouldn't be surprised if Amir Didic is probably making a bigger jump than any other player because he's now going to be in that kind of environment where he gets the opportunity to win a lot of games and to show what kind of player he is. So in terms of just the profile of what he's got as a defender, the height, the ability on the ball, there's no potentially better defender in the Canadian Premier League, and now he can maybe start to deliver on that in a team like Pacific.
Gareth, I know this is a home run for you, so I just wanted to ask as well: is this his best chance to move up as well if it goes well?
Maybe I don't know. I was going to take it a different direction, just avoid repeating exactly what Ollie said. I like what Cavalry's doing. Honestly, Tommy Wilden Jr. knows how he wants his team to play. Like, this is a team that could contend in the Scottish Premier League. Like, they're going to kick the crap out of you every week. Charlie Trafford comes on board. Fraser Aaron comes on board. Elijah Atakubi back in the team. Like, this team is not going to be fun to play against. They're just going to be a bunch of miserable SOBs. I think that Tommy Wilden Jr. likes that. He's like, wheels up. Every game, we know how we play. We play tight defensive football. If you want to scrap, we can go there. We can play a little bit as well. So I'm looking at Cavalry right now, and maybe it seems like it's on repeat because going into every siege, like, Cavalry. I think that some people are sleeping on them. I think that this team is going to be excellent this year. They've kept the core group together. They've added a couple players. Trafford ×2. Bring it on. I'm gonna love watching some Cavalry football. Ollie, it's like watching MK Dons over all the years, like what they're establishing there, what they're putting together in terms of style.
In what way?
Lower division English football. Like, this team has that written all over it. Play a little bit direct. It.
I don't want to get into this in too much detail here, but we actually had a higher average possession than Manchester City last season. So
okay, this is where I go.
Watch some MK Dons games.
No, thank you.
You're getting some value, some Canadian content in there now as well. But yes, Wheels, good shout. It'll be great to see Old Trafford and New Trafford. That was a nice touch from the press release to see the cousins
or Mason
unite.
Trafford, man. He's not that old.
I know. He's old just Trafford. Designated as Old Guy Trafford now.
What did he do to Ryan Reynolds? Like, he goes to Wrexham, then whoop, you're out. Ryan Reynolds is like, there's only one Canadian around here.
That's right. We can only have one, and two is just not acceptable. This is a question from Chop that's been in the comments for a while. I've been wanting to get to it. Let's address it now. Back to you, Gareth. How far do you think Canada will get in the World Cup since they're basically going to qualify?
We did this last week. Like, this is impossible to know. Like, yes, they have a chance. Costa Rica, I referenced this in 2014, won a group with England, Uruguay, and Italy. Like, you get into the World Cup. Let's see what the draw has in store. Yeah, of course this team can advance from the group, but it all just depends on who they play, who's available, who might be unavailable. Like, there's so many things that can change between now and November. I think it's ridiculous that, just dream big, okay? That's my advice. Dream big.
This is from Mike. Stephen Vittoria is 35 and a solid center back, but is Kamal Miller and Scott Kennedy the present and future, thinking ahead to the 2026 World Cup, of the center back position for Canada? Do you see anyone else emerging, Ollie?
Well, I think one of the reasons Canada's been more successful than maybe people expected them to be defensively is that I wouldn't compare these two types of players, right? I think John Herdman has designed a system in a way where, Vittoria has his responsibilities and they're different to the ones that Miller and Kennedy have and Alistair Johnston has on the other side, right? So, Vittoria is obviously not as athletic as those guys. You don't want to put him in open space defending as much as those players. He's maybe not going to step into midfields in the way that we've seen Johnston do and, nearly as frequently. But what he gives you is experience, reading of the game, great aerial ability to organize everyone around him and kind of anchor that back line. So I think they have different roles. I think Miller and Kennedy will continue to compete with each other and with Derek Cornelius as well. And then who is going to be the player to really push Vittoria and compete with him, I think is an open question. It's been Daniil Henry, but I don't know if Henry is, well, I don't think Henry has done enough to really threaten Vittoria's place in the starting lineup. So is there someone else who could potentially come through and, be competition for him in that kind of role? I would predict probably not before the World Cup, but obviously they're going to need someone in that role in the longer term.
Charlie, I see you nodding along like a bobblehead in the top right corner. If there is someone to emerge and contend for that spot, who do you think it might be?
I don't think there's a lot of names that I could see really pressing into that group in the very immediate future. The question, are Miller and Kennedy the present and future of the center back position? They're certainly not the present without Steven Vittoria, right? He's not going anywhere for at least a little bit. He's sturdy enough. I'm sure that he's going to be part of this team for at least another couple of years. Scott Kennedy, I know that we know where he plays at a club level. We've seen him have some strong performances for Canada. I don't think I've seen enough from him for me to put him really in a comfortable starting position over, certainly not Vittoria or Miller or anybody else. So I think he's one for maybe a little bit further down the line. But yeah, Ollie's right. Steven Vittoria is a very important player, and they do have different roles in the squad at the moment. And I'm sure there is a contingency plan, a progression plan for once Steven Vittoria is a little bit further up there and not able to contribute in the same ways. But for now, I think that he's quite vital to the way this team plays.
Well, at this rate, we might see Vittoria's kids replacing him because we've seen them come on the pitch after the match and kick about with dad. And
there'll be other players. I mean, like, this is something over the years we've been able to develop as center backs. Like, I know that over the recent years, it's been maybe the thinnest position, but there's preparations underway for a Canada under 20 camp. There's certainly going to be players that are going to have a look. Justin Smith is playing at Nice. I know that they're trying to keep him available with the French Federation. Is he a player that could maybe come and play for Canada? Halbouni with Werder Bremen, like, he was supposed to come into the January camp before it was canceled. He's another center back who maybe is a little bit intriguing. We see some developing here domestically in MLS and CPL. So I'm not worried. I mean, Vittoria and Hutchinson are playing through, to next December with the men's national team. So this is more of a long-term projection rather than a short-term need right now.
Well, thank you for the question, Mike. And I know producer Kyle just switched Gareth off screen, but I got to come right back to Gareth because we have a question from James, who asks, is Marcelo Flores swayed before the World Cup? If he is, would you see him being in Canada's starting 11?
No, he's not playing first team football at a senior level. He's still playing youth football. I think he's a player that, could very well be part of that squad. And can add a different element. Like, Canada just doesn't have that AM that kind of operates in his way. So I think it would also take a little bit of time to figure out how best to use that player within the system that Canada plays. We kind of dealt with it on a show earlier in the week. I think that no matter how this team plays, because they play 2, 3, 4 different ways, there's probably 8 players I came up with, Ollie, that I think that would start for Canada no matter how they decide to play, and probably about 3 spots up for grabs. I wouldn't put Flores in that mix. It's too much too soon.
Ollie, you agree?
I think it's a bad idea to go chasing dual nationals with promises of, you're going to be starting and we're going to put you straight in. I know that he's a kid with big talent, and I'm sure he's got, very high expectations about his own future when you're an academy player at Arsenal and you're doing very well within that system. But you can't start going around the world and every young player you find who can play for Canada just saying, we're going to have minutes for you straight away. They have to earn it, and they have to be willing to come in and be treated the same way as everyone else. And right now, as Gareth said, he's not a player playing first team football. So I don't think he cracks Canada's starting 11.
Charlie, you okay down there? You're getting a little light into the eye,
I
blind
think
action going
Do you
on.
need
I
to
got a
close
little
the
bit of that
blinds?
sun. I got that sun that Ollie managed to kick out, but I think we're
It's a
okay
beautiful
now.
day in Toronto.
Another question from Finn. With Pacific starting to add new guys as well as re-signings to reshape this team, including the guy 45 minutes ago, anything known about the Dutch youngster they just signed? Any other players out there maybe for some experienced depth? I'm not sure if you caught the CPL wire, Charlie, as you were getting ready for the show, but what if anything, can you tell us for Finn's question?
Yeah, this player, Gennaro Daniels. A Dutch international, I think, played for a couple of solid youth teams there. I think he was with PSV at first, and then he transferred to play with FC Utrecht in their youth system. Hasn't played a lot of first-year professional football, but I think he's only 20 years old, so he's definitely got that kind of pedigree, that sort of thing. I think he's had some trials at some pretty impressive clubs and at the sort of Serie A and possibly even Bundesliga sorts of levels. So I think he is a pretty interesting player for Pacific, who have made a number of kind of interesting complementary signings. I think the core of their team is still pretty much returning players. Obviously, your Marco Bustos, your Manuel Aparicio, those kinds of players that are coming in, but they have made some of these little auxiliary signings to their attack that are going to help them, and it'll be interesting to see how they kind of integrate those players as well.
Well, they had the Dutch connection in the CPL final with Dos Santos getting what some might have thought was a surprise start, so maybe another home run here. I've been told this is a fun question, so here we go. Question from Portos on IG. Will soccer eventually overtake hockey in popularity in Canada? The diehard soccer supporters are screaming, hell yes. The hockey guys are saying, never in my lifetime or my grandkids' lifetime. I'm asking a series of soccer people this question, but Gareth, can you see it becoming Canada's game?
I honestly, I don't care. I could care like here's a message to you. Just get them off the screen. Just put me up.
Wheels demanding
Wheels
his
gonna
solo.
on a
Here we
rant.
go.
Can you do this? This inferiority complex needs to stop. Let's stop comparing soccer in this country with every other sport. We're on a good wave right now. We're rolling. We're moving forward. We're progressing. Everything is building in a positive way. So let's just look at what we're doing as a soccer community and figure out how we can do it better rather than looking at everyone else and comparing ourselves to them. It's not productive. Thank you.
Wheels had a solo time. I was just enjoying the rant. They're always a home run. Ollie,
why does it matter? Who cares? Who cares?
It's a question from Portos. We have to ask Portos what they think. Ollie, do you want to answer the question, or do you agree with Wheels and think we don't need to humor this one?
Do you want a solo shot? Get a solo shot.
I think I'm okay. Thank you.
Okay. Well, and
how long is eventually? Maybe in our grandchildren's lifetime, right? Probably not in the next half century or so, but in a country like this with the demographics like they are nowadays compared to 100 years ago, of course it's possible eventually.
Pierre, by the way, agrees with Wheels. Finn saying, gotta zoom right into Wheels' face whenever he says or he has any solos. Charlie, you haven't heard from you yet. Where do you stand on this issue?
Yeah, it not only does it depend how you define eventually, it depends how you define popularity. I mean, if we're talking youth participation, you can
into the
argue
technicalities we go with Charlie O'Connor Clark.
Good point.
Wheels
Good
is
point.
right. Why does it matter where you rank? I think we've gotten to a point with Canadian soccer where people will pay attention now. Canada doesn't need to beg people in its own country to pay attention anymore, I think. So once you're at that point, then really you don't need to grovel for support like that. You know that the sport has that kind of support in this country. There's always been tons of soccer fans in Canada, right? They just haven't necessarily paid attention to the game domestically. Now they are, and they'll continue to. And honestly, I don't think it matters where you rank. You don't need to, if you're part of a soccer community, you don't need to despise other sports just because people watch them as
Right.
well.
But
No,
it-
you do.
it-
No. That's not correct. You do need to despise rugby.
well,
Okay.
You do not. No, you do not.
But
Can
it
we
used,
just remove Ollie
it
alone?
used to be the case, like Charlie, like in you been watching for so long in this country, like 10, 15 years ago, you didn't have channels like this, which are dedicated to covering the Canadian game, right? That's why this business model has had to be built out. So that animosity that existed before is because there was no place to consume. There was no visibility whatsoever. But now there's not an excuse, right? Like you have, it's not just here. It's a number of different blogs and websites and Twitch stream. Like you can consume whatever you want, whenever you want.
Yeah.
So it's it's not worth complaining about anymore. Just go consume what you want to.
I think it's a great point. And Charlie, I had to give you the applause because I've never understood the rhetoric where if you're a fan of sport A, you must hate another sport, or you can only love your own sport. Just enjoy Canadians being good at multiple sports. We had the increased popularity in the NBA when the Toronto Raptors took their success. Everyone was a Raptors fan for a while. There's still a big contingent, and Canada basketball had their ascendancy. Just enjoy it all. You don't have to hate another sport just because you love another's. What's that?
Their national basketball team.
Well, they got closer. They got closer than they did.
Not
You're
very
right.
good.
You are right to say that they never achieved perhaps some of the hype train that followed it. Ollie, we don't do this a lot, so this means I'm excited for a question like this. We're going to talk League One Ontario. I know you have an upcoming feature on Electric City. What do you make of what you've learned in those conversations? There's, of course, the transfer fees from a League One Ontario side, which caught a lot of people off guard. Now, we don't know if it was like $1 and it was just to say that they paid for the guy, but hey, I digress. Is this a legit outfit that is demanding that whoever replaces David Clankin as commissioner and the Board of Governors, that they become part of this Canadian Premier League in a very short period of time?
Well, Gareth Wheeler certainly hopes so, because there is so much for him to work with here in terms of play-by-play opportunities with this team. Electric City.
I got a mad electric slide. It's decent. Really decent.
Oh, man.
No, it's a really they're a really interesting club. I don't know if the story's out yet. It's coming out later today, but like it's one where they're kind of presenting a pretty idyllic picture of what soccer could look like in communities like Peterborough, smaller communities and markets that what could potentially want to come into the CPL, and they're very intent on 2024. They want to be there in 2 years' time. So they have a group of local investors. They have, they've had an incredible response, I think, from their community. They have plans for a small soccer-specific stadium in Peterborough, as well as a training facility to go on with it. As you said, they're already signing professional caliber players. Jordan Brown for ex-Cavalry has just signed with them today. And they're really intent on doing this. So it's one that I think around the country, a lot of people are going to be watching, and it's going to have implications for what we can start to believe about what the CPL can be in the future. Because if they can do it in Peterborough in a community like that, and they can lean on, much like Halifax have done, the kind of local energy that's there in a smaller community, and make that work and make it sustainable, it opens up so many potential opportunities around this country for future CPL teams, right? So it's one that I think has real significance. If you're a fan of this league, of any team or anywhere in the country, you want to keep an eye on this, because it's really going to have implications, I think, for future markets and what expansion can look like around this country.
Well, the article will be available on OneSoccer.ca. Once it's posted, it'll definitely be up, I believe, by end of day, but if not, certainly over the weekend. So make sure you go check that out. Bookmark OneSoccer.ca if you haven't already. Give the site a good tour. This is a question from Masood, who asks, is the number of mistakes in big games by Tristan Henry something Forge needs to address? I think in the spur of the moment, my call was ghosts of CONCACAF past come back to haunt Tristan Henry again. Charlie, what do you make of Masood's question? Is there something to this?
Well, I mean, we can't deny that it's happened multiple times now. With that blunder against Arcahai in the 2020 CONCACAF League, and last night's goal, or Wednesday night's goal. What day is
Wednesday,
it? It's Friday.
Yeah.
Wednesday's goal against Cruz Azul. I mean, I'm not a professional goalkeeper. I can't say what what I would have done. It is a conversation. I obviously know that Tristan Henry is one of the most well-liked players at Forge. He's been a crucial part of that locker room and that environment for all of their success since year one. So he's a player that they'll defend to the very end, and they love him there. And he has been on the whole, a very good goalkeeper for them in the CPL and in the CONCACAF League. These moments, they happen. I think that this is maybe something that you work with him specifically on and try to figure out if there's a mental thing that you can improve on, if it's just terrible luck that these blunders seem to happen at the biggest stages. I don't really know what that is, but I think that definitely Forge are going to continue on with him. They're going to keep working with him because they value him so highly, and they just will go to war for this player. So I think that really there's not much of a conversation to be had other than how do we avoid that happening in the future with Tristan.
It's a good point you raised because, look, Forge is so well drilled and so good defensively that time and time again, Tristan doesn't have to make a lot of big saves. Yeah. He's typically there when his number is called, but you're right. It's when it's on the biggest stage and on their biggest nights. It's unfortunate for someone who, as you rightfully admit, is so universally well liked in Hamilton. Question from Pierre Paquette once again.
Are we allowed to weigh in on this or no?
Well, we had a new question from Pierre come on the screen, but I'd love for you guys to chime in. It's always the COC show.
Masood was like dismissing my comments because I'm a United supporter. He supports Liverpool. Not every club just jumps a goalkeeper when they make a mistake, like Liverpool and Karius and a number of other goalkeepers. Ooh. So Forge is a classy and a well-run
should we talk
club,
about
classy and well-run? Distant long. That's ancient history. By the way, turned 50 this week. 50 this week. Roy Carroll was with the club for an extended period of time. Not time to dump Tristan Henry. It's time to put an arm around him and stay with him. David Dea this season, lights out, best goalkeeper in the Premier League. So.
Change the tune a bit.
Let's bounce this question from Pierre to Ollie. Now, we have addressed this a couple times throughout the week, so it's totally possible that Pierre wants to know if you've thought about it some more, changed your opinion, or he just missed it the first time it came out on OneSoccer.ca. So, Ollie, the question is, a lot of people, I'm assuming especially those who are fans of CF Montreal, saying that Montreal got a point stolen or 2 points stolen in Mexico. What are you thinking about the situation now that you've had a few days to digest?
That Santos Laguna stole the win? Is that what we're saying?
The question is, a lot of people saying CF Montreal got stolen in Mexico. What are you thinking about it? I assume that means the VAR debacle.
Okay. Well, look, I personally didn't think that was hugely controversial. I don't really see it as any different to a player being offside in the build-up to a goal. It was a foul. Don't think it was so far back that you can be really angry that it was called back. I know a lot of people, maybe most people, disagree with me on that, but that's just how I kind of saw that move. In terms of the overall result, I don't think you can say Montreal was robbed. Like, I don't think they played that well. I just didn't think Santos Laguna looks that good either. And I think coming back into the second leg, they should feel pretty good about their chances. Now they've got a game under their belt of turning that tie around. But I didn't think their performance on the night was, so good that they can really complain too much about a 1-0 defeat.
Gareth, I'll give you a chance to answer that one if you want, because I didn't ask you last time when you wanted to weigh in, so I'm going to open the floor.
Yeah, we addressed it earlier in the week. I just don't like that being the use of how to use VAR. Like, going back and dealing with something subjective like a challenge, like a tackle in the middle of the park. Like, how many phases are we going to go back? Or any challenge or tackle that's won in the middle of the park, are we then going to go back and review that, then decide whether a goal that scored 15 seconds later should count? I didn't like the application of the rule. I understood why it was given, but in the spirit of keeping things simple, clear, and obvious, using the four cited times when to use VAR, it was soft. It was soft for me. So no, they didn't get screwed. I don't think they did enough to go on and win the game, but I think that goal should have stood. Draw, probably did enough for a draw in that game. That's fine.
Yeah, they defended for their lives, and they defended pretty well until the very end, so I don't disagree with you at all there, Wheels. This is from our friend JJDTV. Ollie, how close is Brezza to getting Canadian men's national team call-up? He played very well in Mexico on Tuesday.
Yeah, I think he'll have every chance. I think John Herdman has been pretty consistent with the way he selected the goalkeepers. It's Boyan, it's Crepeau, and then the third player is who's playing, who's in form. So at different times, that's been Dane Sinclair, it's been James Pantemis. Obviously now Pantemis seems to have lost that job to Sebastian Brezza. I think he comes right into the mix. They went with Luttweiler, obviously playing in Europe during the January window, but as the MLS season gets started. If Brezza's the starter and he's playing like he did this week, then I think he's got every chance of being the third goalkeeper.
But how much does that matter? Like, we're looking at the wrong place here because he's not. It's Borjan and Crepeau. You have your 1-2, 1A, 1B. I mean, we're really digging deep. Like, this is a fringe conversation that's taking place here. This isn't like a mainstream talking point when it comes to the Canadian men's national team. And on top of that, what's the rush? Just let him establish himself as a first team goalkeeper in a Major League Soccer. He wasn't the starter last season for CF Montreal. So, like, look, I get that we're like this ADD culture now where everything has to happen now and everything has to happen so quickly. Like, just give it time. Let's see. He could turn into a pumpkin. For me, I was watching him on Tuesday. I'm like, wow, he has a lot of room for improvement in terms of playing with the ball at his feet.
Yeah,
there's nothing that you can take away from that and you know, with any kind of confidence. So I think that he has a long way to go.
You're right about that. I think he needs to improve with the ball at his feet. But at the same time, by the same token, like, look at Max Crepeau, right? Like, he came out of being released by Montreal. Suddenly he's Vancouver's number one. And now we're talking about him as being right there with Milan Borjan. So these things.
But it took time. It took time.
It took a little bit of time, not a lot of time. So these things can happen, I think, quicker than you think.
Yeah, well, so by virtue of that, if Thomas Hassel is the number one in Vancouver,
sure,
does he get into the Canada team before? Like, this is where we're at right now. We're discussing the potential, not the third goalkeeper, the potential third goalkeeper of the Canadian men's national team. It's kind of crazy to me.
Don't need to worry about that position.
The question I have is the Saskatchewanian House's penalty abilities, because we've already seen Brezza establish himself, so maybe that's the deciding factor in this potential third, fourth in line, but it is nice to be able to have
like Tim Krul at the World Cup. Bring him on for the shootout.
There you go. Yeah. There you go. This is an interesting one. So this is from John again, who asked, do you think the Nations League will get the same viewership as the World Cup qualifiers? We certainly hope so. Yeah. And do you think Canada will go to the Nations League finals? No, because the name World Cup is not in it. Therefore, it's not going to get the same. We would love it. But I think, Gareth, it's safe to say that what Canada has done in this campaign is going to help viewership for anything to do with the men's national team program. But the question here as well, do you think Canada can make the Nations League finals?
Yes, because right now Canada's the top team in CONCACAF on form. And look, I think that's the next step, like, is making sure the Canadian public remains engaged with this team. So whether it's the Nations League, high profile friendlies heading into the World Cup, that, you know, it gets a lot of attention, it gets a lot of focus. And because of the success and popularity of the team right now, I don't see why that number wouldn't be much more significant than what we saw in 2019 when Canada was playing the U.S. in the Nations League. So let's hope for some big numbers, and the players deserve it. And look, like, all these conversations that you're debating about players getting a look or who's ready to come into the team or starting roles or positions once the World Cup comes, every game is another opportunity for players to make an impression. A year ago, no one would have thought that Tajon Buchanan would have been a focal point for this Canadian men's national team. No one. Like, he was playing with the under-23s and then whoop, skyrocketed. So, I mean, Alistair Johnston, same thing. Like, so they got to go and improve it, and that's why you should watch and tell your friends to watch, and they should tell their friends to go on and watch it too.
On OneSoccer. Yeah.
On
OneSoccer.
Charlie, our guy. He's officially invited back for next Friday after that, so that check's been signed. Ollie, and I'm going to go to Charlie first because he just made a fantastic plug, so he deserves the chance to answer this question first. From Afrikaans Football, I like that. What is the position the Canadian men's national team needs to upgrade to elevate from its current run of play?
Man, I didn't know it was so easy to get you guys on my side. But
bribery works, man.
Adam on your side.
That's
true. Okay. Wheeler, I've got the University of Western Ontario
yes
for you. Okay, the question.
On your
side.
Can
M&T needs to upgrade. When you look at the starting 11, you don't look at any of those positions and think, wow, they could really use an upgrade on that. I think maybe the element that they don't necessarily have, I think we've mentioned it earlier in the show, is that true creative number 10 sort of player. They've got guys who can. Jonathan Osorio has done it occasionally. I think Tajon Buchanan did it for about half an hour in a game, but I think that is maybe the profile of player that this team doesn't necessarily have. You can argue whether or not they need it. But I think it is maybe a dynamic that if you were looking for an upgrade, there was a different element you could add to your attack, that might be it. But other than that, I don't think there's really a glaring issue or a glaring position that this team doesn't have in it at the moment.
Ollie, chance for you to answer this question, then we have another question from Pierre. And I want you to tell me if there's something to this theory that I'm about to propose to you. We, as in the Canadian soccer landscape and the men's national team in particular, doing so well playing CONCACAF opponents. Does this question need to get asked again or addressed later when different styles of teams and just different regions play against Canada can perhaps expose something?
Of course, yeah. You know, when you start playing, I don't think Mexico are at their best right now, and they're always going to be, when they're at their best, they're always going to be the biggest test you get in this region. The United States are good, but not great, in my opinion. So, of course, you know, there's going to be more significant tests outside the region and teams that are playing with a bit more confidence and in better form. And Canada are going to learn lessons from those games. And those games in the lead up to the World Cup will be important. To answer the original question, I think it's still a defender. I wouldn't say in particular what kind of defender, but I think you just look at the way Sam Adekubi has improved this team. You know, anytime you have an opportunity to bring in, whether it's a fullback, a centre back, whatever it may be, another defender who can really impact the starting lineup, it helps. I'm not sure if I see one who's going to do that between now and the World Cup. I think it's pretty set at this point. But if anyone has the potential to do that, it would improve the team for sure.
So this question from Pierre, thank you for that, Ollie, by the way. Gareth,
you're welcome.
Why World Cup qualifying games have not happened at Stade Saputo? Is it because of the pitch?
Where would you like them to play?
The Big O, Stade Saputo, but in general, Montreal, why?
No, well, Toronto is the first choice of the players once again. Secondly, in the winter window, like the Big O, we're going to see the CONCACAF Champions League game there this week. I mean, what a letdown, playing in a facility like that. And the government in the city weren't willing to step up and either do renovations or build a proper facility that would welcome a 2026, possibility of being a host city for that World Cup. They bailed on that. Where is Montreal right now in terms of their commitment to our national team and their program, and developing soccer in this nation? CF Montreal seems like a little bit on an island right now. So I think more needs to be done. Professionalism across the board. We'll see, like with Vancouver coming back into the mix, like keep fingers crossed, hope that they do come back into the mix and money's put in place in order to convert, BC Place into a grass field. That needs to happen. So if you want to play with the big boys, then you got to put on your big boy pants. You got to open up your wallet and be willing to spend on infrastructure in order to build and make it happen. And thus far, Montreal just hasn't done anywhere near enough. And, I think that Canada Soccer kind of gave Edmonton the benefit of the doubt because they're willing to spend and invest to potentially be a World Cup host city. What's Montreal done? Like, they're so far on the periphery right now that it's,
At the same time, though, like I get what you're saying, Wills, and you're right, but that's all happening at like a high level, right? Like government and things like that. Like I would love to see. I'm not saying a World Cup. Well, obviously we don't have any World Cup qualifiers left, but a game at some point before the World Cup at Stade Saputo, I think would be fantastic. The fans in that city love soccer as much as anywhere in this country. That place would be packed out. It would be a great atmosphere, a great place to play. So if we can get one game in there before the World Cup, I think we should do.
Charlie, anything to add?
Yeah. Well, I just add that Canada Soccer is not ignoring Montreal. They had one of those women's national team celebration games at Stade Saputo just a couple months ago. So I'm sure it'll be considered whenever they are looking at where to play these friendlies or Nations League games or whatever. So, have hope, people in Montreal.
One final question of the day. It's going to go to our guest. Gabriel Perez asks, CPL expansion coming soon, ? So, Charlie, your task. I'm going to give you a blank check. You can name a team. You can put it in any market you want. Where is it going in this situation? And then in the current climate, where do you think it realistically might be next?
That's a tough one. So where would I want to see a team?
Yeah, you have been given a David Klanikin departure franchise. Where would you like to put it?
Yeah, without any inside knowledge or anything of that sort, it's gotta be Quebec City, I think. Yeah. Somewhere up there. They need a team. They need professional soccer in that city. I think it would be a lot of fun. But I don't know. I think the league has been pretty clear recently that they really want a team there and they would love to have a team there, but you need an ownership group and you need a stadium. And until that happens, it's not there yet. So I don't know. In terms of anything coming, I genuinely couldn't tell you anything specific. Obviously, there are teams that have already been announced as, offered or given bids. There's one in Vancouver and one in Saskatchewan. I think those clubs need to happen first and get off the ground. But yeah, obviously there's lots of interested groups. There's a lot of ambition. So I think we will see some more coming in the mid to near future, hopefully.
All right. Final word of the day went to Charlie O'Connor Clark. I want to thank everybody for their questions in the chat today. Throughout the hour, it was fantastic. Hopefully, we were able to get as many of them as possible. Charlie,
it's
by the way,
a long time sitting here with you guys, Mike.
It is, and but at least you get 3 days off from us now, Wheels. You don't even have to see us on Monday, so that's our family day present to you. So, Charlie, thank you. Ollie, Gareth, you guys are the best, and Kyle and Armin behind the scenes. We appreciate it. OneSoccer.ca, at OneSoccer, the place to be for the best clips, news, announcements, and everything to do with the world of Canadian soccer. We will see you on Tuesday for OneSoccer Today with Danny Petrillo. Until then, have a great long weekend.